Joining us now, Douglas Carswell, the president and CEO of the Mississippi Center for Public Policy. Good to see you again, Douglas. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on. It's wonderful to be here.
So the first thing that I want to ask you about is you coming from across the pond there in the UK and served in government over there. And we're happy to have you here in the great state of Mississippi and doing important policy work on behalf of the state. What do the Brits and what are the UK folks, what do they think about July 4th? Do they see that as a positive or a negative? I mean, serious question.
I think most people in Britain think of it as a wonderful celebration of Americanness. I imagine that if we'd been having this conversation, 150 years ago, there might have been one or two people who are still sore. But I think actually most Brits recognize and actually kind of take pride in the fact that, in a way, America was a kind of an offshoot of Britain.
Sure.
And, many of the things that have made America great, people in Britain admire and look at and I think sometimes almost wish they could emulate. You have a defined constitution. We don't. The ideas of some of those great thinkers, which are, John Locke and others, they've taken root in American soil and flourished in the New World. And in fact, they haven't just flourished in the New World. They're so successful in the New World. America went over back to the Old World to rescue those ideas and democracy. So I think there's a huge fondness of we'll forgive you for Bunker Hill if you forgive us for burning the White House.
I got you. Okay, deal. But so much of our structure of government and our philosophy is embedded in the Magna Carta.
Yeah.
Right? I mean some pretty smart people put that together.
Yeah, I was literally reading the American Bill of Rights, and it echoes in some stages almost word for word the original British Bill of Rights written 100 years before. And I mean, the similarities between the two systems is extraordinary. I have to say, I think America's found a better way of institutionalizing those ideals. One of the reasons why America is the most successful country on the planet is because it has hardwired liberty and freedom into the DNA of the country in a way that Britain hasn't been as successful at doing yet.
The left seems to be more focused on denouncing the nation than it does crediting this nation for anything good and virtuous and noble and of value. And it's almost like, the business person in me comes out and says, well, you're looking at a balance sheet and all you see is the liabilities. You don't consider the assets. Therefore, you just look at it as bankrupt.
No country's perfect. But my goodness, America has got the big things right, and hasn't just got the big things right. America has got the big things right better than any other country. And let me give you proof of this. Think of the southern border. Do you look at the southern border and see tens of thousands of Texans climbing over the fence trying to make their way to Venezuela? No, the traffic's all coming the other way. The fact that people want to come to America, the fact that people from every country, every culture, every continent, every creed want to come here for a better life tells you that life is better in America for a reason, because America has got the fundamentals right. Yeah, sure, you might have produced an occasional idiot mayor or an idiot president or a police chief who commits some gross violation of their lawful duty. But my goodness, America is head and shoulders morally and politically and economically better and head and shoulders above any other country on the planet.
And it occurs to me as well, Douglas, we're talking to Douglas Carswell, President and CEO of Center for Public Policy. It occurs to me that despite the flaws in our systems, in our institutions, it's still the envy of the world.
Absolutely.
They wish they could implement it.
Absolutely. What I often think of when I listen to some of these liberal professors preaching this creed that says America's always in the wrong, I think that actually they don't really know much about not only their own country, they don't really know much about the rest of the world. Think of, in America's 240-something year history, the worst American president that America's produced. Okay, maybe you'll say it's I don't know, Nixon. Maybe you might be unkind and say it was a more recent president. But if the worst that the American Republic has come up with is Richard Nixon, you compare him to the worst leader that Russia has come up with in 240 years, or Germany has produced in 240 years, or any other country. America has produced pretty good leaders, a pretty good political system, and the happiest, most resourceful, most optimistic people that have ever existed in the world.
And you have to wonder, we were talking about this earlier, were it not for the freedom that we are afforded here in this country, which enables us to produce so much value and innovation, it's impacted the world. It's not just America that benefits from that.
I'm holding in my hand my smartphone. Now, the technology that produced the smartphone was developed in the United States, and it puts in my hand more computing power than NASA had the year they landed a man on the moon. And what's more is the technology that America has created in inventing the smartphone is now affordable to the poorest African farmer.
That's very true.
For a few $100s. America has created this extraordinary material uplift in humankind. It's American medicine that created the first immunization against COVID. It's American philanthropy and medicine that has dramatically cut infant mortality rates in Africa. America is the global good guy. It sometimes produces imperfect leaders, but America is the global good guy. And it's thanks to American strength and power that the world is a better place than it's ever been.
No doubt. And aren't we not dangerously close? I say dangerously, but incredibly close to eliminating extreme poverty globally?
Absolutely. Why? Because America has created a global free trade system that has created this extraordinary uplift in wealth. It's not only enriched ordinary Americans who can now buy ever more affordable goods. It means that if you are a relatively poor person growing up in sub-Saharan Africa, you have the benefits of this explosion in material wealth too.
No doubt. All right. So what concerns me, however, though, Douglas, is that our government and many whom we elect to government, they feel like they got to meddle. It's like, okay, we got to do something. And every time they do something, they just make it worse. Just get the hell out of the way. That's not hard to figure out.
They've done some really, really, really bad meddling. I'll give you the example of energy policy. Now, every time you go fill up the car with gas, you are literally paying for the consequences of their meddling. Ask yourself this question. The United States is now a net exporter of gas and oil. The United States has underneath its land vast quantities of oil and gas reserves. So why have the prices gone up? Don't fall for this thing about Ukraine. No, the reason why energy costs are going up is because the government has created mandates and restrictions that force energy producers to use expensive non-nuclear renewables and prevent them from exploiting the naturally occurring oil and gas that America has.
No doubt about it.
Underneath her.
The solution is under our feet, as I like to say.
Absolutely.
And though it is true that we produce out of the ground sufficient oil to power our needs, our consumption, fact is we don't have enough refining capacity. We have to send it overseas, the type of oil that we produce, and we have to send it overseas to get refined, because we hadn't built a refinery over here in a long time. And a lot of that's because government says, hey, we're going to shut you guys down.
Another big problem is so-called ESG investing. This is so-called environmental, social, and governance investing. This basically means that the three biggest fund managers in America, who are BlackRock, Vanguard, and I forget the name of the other one. It's not Invesco, it's the other one. They control trillions of dollars, and they require that money is used in investments that are so-called environmentally friendly, which means that the oil and gas industry in America has been starved of capital. Right. This is why we have a supply constraint in America at the moment.
Yeah, and that's another situation where I wish they'd just stick to being good fiduciaries and not worried about ESG stuff, which I think is insane. And then we're all paying the price for that.
Absolutely.
We absolutely are all paying the price for that. We talked about on the show, you're probably familiar with this, that there are activist investors that have obtained enough of Exxon stock to have the voting sway to put members on the board who are there to take them out of the industry, their business. Imagine having these folks who, again, have a fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders of the company saying, we want you to get out of that business. Don't make any money off that.
Like putting a vegetarian in charge of McDonald's. I mean, it's kind of burgers is what they do.
So my wife texted, she's listening, she said, she thinks Jimmy Carter was the worst president, although she thinks that President Biden is about to surpass him. We'll talk more about that. We got Douglas Carswell, the president and CEO of Mississippi Center for Public Policy, in the Element Well studios. We'll take a break and be right back. We're talking to Douglas Carswell, the president and CEO of the Mississippi Center for Public Policy. So, off the air, we were discussing what appears to be strong anti-incumbent sentiment with respect to political races in this country. I think we witnessed a bit of that here in our congressional races recently, but it's not just here. So it's my opinion, and I'll get you to weigh in on this, Douglas, that folks are in general not happy. Polls show that, poll after poll, not happy with the direction the country's going, not happy with their personal situation. And almost in all cases, that filters down, distills down to their economic situation. That's how people, I think, kind of grade their particular scenario. But Democrat policy, to a great extent, I think, has contributed to the economic conditions, the rampant inflation, stagflation, et cetera. And it occurs to me that Republicans may be paying the price for that just kind of all lumped together. I'm not happy. Let's just throw all the bums out and get somebody new in there.
In politics, I think there's two fundamental moods. One is continuity. We like this guy. We like what's happening. Let's stick with it and change. And I think there's definitely a strong mood of change out there at the moment. And that's spilling over into primary contests for both parties, but particularly the Republicans. You said there that you felt it was largely driven by straitened economic times. I'm not sure that's 100% the case.
No, what I'm saying is I think that's top of the list when people go to cast their ballot. That's usually tops the list of what they think about.
I think culture is also
now more than ever. I agree with you.
Incredibly important.
I agree
and
with
a combination of a deteriorating standard of living and a feeling of cultural alienation by arrogant, out of touch, and incompetent elites is a toxic anti-incumbency combination. But I think there's something that is particular to Mississippi in all of this.
Okay.
Mississippi has had a Republican supermajority for getting on for a decade now. And I think there's a particular feeling that I detect when I travel around the state and talk to people, whether they're Republican or not, of, okay, what have they done? Where's the beef? What other than changing the flag has happened? Now, I think we can point with some credibility to a bill on combating critical race theory and a big reduction in income tax. But if I was a Republican strategist, and I'm not, I'm the one guy in Mississippi who's not allowed to vote. If I was a Republican strategist in Mississippi, I would be concerned about the failure to apparently make change happen. Look, this is the 50th out of 50 states by so many measures, right. And yet there's so much we could do to make the state competitive, like Tennessee or Florida or Texas.
Yep.
It requires the powers that be across the state working together. And if you've got a supermajority, you can do that. So what's happening, guys?
Yeah, I discuss it a lot. We're at the top of every bad list and the bottom of every good list. Mm-hmm. And it's a bad situation to be in. There was a video. I don't know if you follow the Young Turks, TYT, but they're I'm not sure if you do, but they're a liberal blog and really video site. I don't think they have a show that airs, but they produce videos, and it kind of looks like a news set. But anyhow, they went on the attack of Speaker of the House Philip Gunn last week. There's a 12-minute video, and so it's about his statement that he believes that life begins at conception, and they just rail on him on that. But here's what hurts. What hurts is they start flashing up all these statistics about the state of Mississippi, all of which are true. And basically what they're trying to do is tie his views on abortion and the prohibition of it in the state to all these other areas, infant mortality and health outcomes of mothers, and just a number of other statistics where we just rank last in the country. I think that's an unfair attachment, personally, but I'm tired of being the feature of all those reports.
It's grotesque. It's grotesque and wrong, and it needs to stop. But the way we can stop it is by making the kinds of changes that leaders were making in Tennessee 10, 15 years ago. The reason why Nashville is growing is because they have lower taxes and less regulation. The reason why Alabama is doing better is because they have reduced taxes and deregulated. We need leadership in Mississippi that is prepared to tackle the underlying causes. Look, in Mississippi, we've had a basic model for as long as anyone can remember. It's go to D.C. and get the Fed money. And it doesn't work.
I agree.
If Fed subsidy, if federal, and the late, great Thad Cochran was the master at this. If getting federal subsidy was the way to make Mississippi prosperous, we would be the richest state in the union. But it doesn't work. That approach to economic development just doesn't work. We need a new approach. We need, call it the Tennessee approach. You cut taxes, you deregulate. Then the growth will come. That's what we need.
You're right in that. Last I checked, I'm sure you're familiar with it. I think we get $3 back from the federal government for every dollar we send. And when you think about it, when we define it and identify it as coming from the federal government, what it really means is it's coming from the deep blue states. Yeah. We're being subsidized by the most liberal states in the country. Yeah. That's just a fact.
And the things that we're being subsidized to do are not the things that in a free society we would want to do. And it causes this sense of helplessness. We're 50th out of 50. We're the basket case. It can change, and it needs to change. But it will only come about when we recognize that growth, and we have leadership that recognizes growth comes about because of lower taxes and less regulation. It amazes me as an outsider coming to Mississippi that so many of the rules in this state are the kind of rules you would expect to find in a socialist republic.
Right.
Why do you need a license to do all these occupations? Why do you need a permit from a board or a commission? We produced a report recently called Drain the Swamp, and it was a list of the 222 commissions and boards in downtown Jackson. It's great for politicians because it allows them to promote their buddies onto a board,
right.
But it's not great for the economy of Mississippi. Get rid of half these boards and deregulate. It can be done, and until it's done, we're going to stay 50th out of 50.
It is amazing how many that we do have here in the state. I'd also be a proponent of doing what Texas does with respect to its legislatures every other year.
Yeah. And deliberately designed because they realized when politicians get together,
they mess stuff up.
It's bad for everyone. But look, I think the problem in Mississippi, we've identified it. The issue is, if you've got a supermajority, are you going to do something about it? Because if you don't do something about it, that mood of anti-incumbency sentiment is going to come for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, and but it does seem like that is kind of a prevailing sentiment right now, and something I've talked about and get you to weigh in on as well, Douglas, before we go is, all 50 states think I got to keep my senior members of the Senate or the House in place because they've got committee chairmanships and they've got more control of the money. They can send home the bacon home. Well, when all 50 states do that, we end up with $30 trillion of debt. It's okay for my state to do that, but not yours. You're putting us in debt, right?
I agree. It's not the way to produce wealth, and it's kind of almost un-American, this idea that you send representatives to siphon off federal funds. It's not the way that America prospers.
Yeah, and that's something's got to change with respect to that. All right, so we're all feeling the pinch of this inflation. It's top of the list, price of gas, et cetera. This government in Washington seems to want to detach themselves from any culpability in that. What do you think?
The reason why prices have gone up is because the dollars that you have lost value, and they've lost value for a really simple reason. The government keeps on printing more of them.
Yeah.
Don't blame it on Ukraine. Don't blame it on what's happening globally. The reason why incidentally inflation is happening globally is because lots of governments have followed the lead of the American Fed and printed more money. If you print more money, it loses its value. We need a return to basic, fiscally responsible, conservative economic management. When Reagan came in, we had a very similar problem in the late 1970s, runaway inflation and an energy crisis. Reagan came in, he gave the energy producers permission to go ahead and drill, baby, drill, and he made it very clear when he appointed people to the Fed that easy money, cheap printing money, those days were over. Yeah. And America recovered quickly.
There just doesn't seem to be any interest on the part of this government to make the policy changes that truly could impact positively and rein in this inflation, because they're just too committed to all the social issues, it seems to me.
It's also difficult to know who's actually in charge with this administration.
I know. That's a big problem as well. Douglas, always a pleasure having you in.
Thank you so much.
Studios. Enjoy the conversation.